This is PTV World. I am Syed Shabahat Ali and you are watching Fault Lines. Novel coronavirus is one of the most serious health crises of our contemporary history. This crisis has created chaos for economies and health infrastructure of various countries. Rich countries like United States or poor countries like that of sub-Saharan Africa all are getting affected. Our only defense against this monster is vaccination. But when we look at the statistics of vaccination, there is a haunting picture. 9.6 billion vaccines have been administered in 184 countries so far. We are vaccinating the world with a pace of 39.9 million doses a day. 123 doses have been given to every 100 people. And that might give you a picture as if the entire world is about to get vaccinated. But unfortunately, the reality is very stark in nature. The richer economies are getting far more quickly vaccinated as compared to the poor ones. WHO had set forth a target of accomplishing 10% vaccination by September 2021. 54 countries failed to accomplish the target, most of which were sub-Saharan African economies and some war-affected countries like that of Syria and Yemen. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
To share vaccines equitably is taking its toll on some of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. The gap in vaccination coverage between high-income and upper-middle-income countries on one hand and low-income countries on the other is particularly stark. According to World Health Organization, low-income countries, most of which are in Africa, have received just 0.6% of the nearly 8 billion shots that have been administered. Experts have warned about the inequitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines since the beginning of the pandemic. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus rightly pointed out that no country can vaccinate its way out of the pandemic alone. New variants of concern mean that the risks of infection have increased in all countries for people who are not yet protected by vaccination. Some wealthy countries have also continued to oppose a proposal to temporarily suspend trade rules that protect the monopolies of pharmaceutical companies on COVID-19 health products and technologies. COVAX, the global program for purchasing and distributing COVID-19 vaccines, has struggled to secure enough vaccine doses since its inspection owing to underinvestment in COVAX both in terms of doses and funds. Vaccine equity will accelerate the end of the pandemic by substantially increasing population immunity globally, protection of health systems, enabling economies to fully restart, and reducing the risk of new variants emerging.
My first guest in program is Dr. Syed Madad. She is expert of infectious disease from Harvard Bethel Center, United States. Syed, I welcome you to my program.
Thank you for having me on.
And we are today talking about, we're discussing vaccination. That has become a very important subject for everyone in the world. Again, with the winter going on, the spike in COVID virus has once again reminded us that we are lagging behind in terms of vaccination. What are your thoughts on it, ma'am?
Oh, absolutely. I think you said it very well. We know that what vaccination provides is that it defangs the virus. It really helps protects you against the most severe outcomes. And unfortunately, when we look at it through a vaccine equity lens, as you've mentioned, while we have 32 million doses going into arms every single day around the world, it's not, equally distributed around the world. You're seeing populations, for example, low-income countries and middle-income countries that have very, very poor vaccination rates. But I will also mention it's not just about the vaccination rates, it's also the type of vaccines that are being used in these countries. So if you look at here in the United States, the mRNA-based COVID-19 vaccines, yes, the vaccines have taken a hit in terms of reducing infection, right? And so experiencing symptomatic disease, it has taken a hit on that, but it's still holding very well in terms of protecting against the severe outcomes like hospitalization and death. That can't be said across the board for all these different vaccines, that are being administered around the world. Right now, the World Health Organization has 10, vaccines that they have approved, anything from Sinovac, to Sinopharm. And while these vaccines have also taken a hit, it's yet to be seen, are they also holding up very well against this Omicron variant?
Sarah, we are also seeing that the vaccines are not equally distributed in the world. COVID in one part of the world means it can reach any other part, as we have seen in the recent episode of this very recent contemporary trend of this new variant that started from South Africa, and within no time it reached every corner of the world. With this fact there on table, how safe we are with many countries below 10% vaccination, some literally on 0%.
It's a huge issue. And it's not just an issue from a humanitarian standpoint, it's also an issue for the countries that obviously have a much better immunity wall. And the fact that, these variants can continue to chip away at these walls that we've built. And so it just emphasizes the point that we need to vaccinate faster. We need to vaccinate better. But on top of that, it's not just also about vaccination, which is definitely our number one, number two, and number three strategy that we should be using. We also need to look at different treatment options. You've seen here in the United States, we have different monoclonal antibodies, we have different antiviral pills. They're right now in short supply. We need to also surge those treatments to many of these countries around the world that are experiencing large number of surges. On top of that, we also need to make sure there's better quality masks. You still see a lot of people wearing cloth masks, both here in the US as well as in many other countries. So we have different tools that we can use right now in the interim as vaccination continues to roll out around the world. And we're just not using it appropriately, and we're just not using it enough.
And there is also a terminology used in the world now, it's called vaccine diplomacy. I mean, various pharmaceutical companies are now monopolizing various brands, and then there are states that are preferring one version of vaccine or one kind of vaccine on others. Are there scientifically some differences between, or some differences in the vaccines that are being used, or all of them are equally good? How do you see this as an expert?
Well, all the vaccines are very different, right? And when you compare one vaccine against the other, they are extremely different. So if you're looking at the class of mRNA-based COVID-19 vaccines or some of the other vector-based, vaccines, they're all very different. When you look at their efficacy in terms of symptomatic disease, if you look at their efficacy against, hospitalization and death, they are very different across the board. There are vaccines that are superior than others. And that's where we want to make sure that, for example, when we talk about the mRNA-based vaccines, that we have these tools at these countries around the world, not just giving the vaccines, because that's more of a short-term strategy. We need to look at long-term. Can we develop more of these manufacturing plants, in these countries? Can we provide the recipe? Can we provide the ingredients so that way they can scale up as needed? Because as you see, as we're administering the primary series, you have countries that are also giving booster doses. Here in the U.S., we have, third booster doses. Israel is giving fourth booster doses. We do anticipate maybe you may need another booster dose every year or every couple of years. And so what's going to happen around the world? Are they going to continue to clamor for primary series and then be behind the game when it comes to booster doses? And that's where our long-term strategy needs to look at how can we provide these vaccines in a way that they can build it, develop it in-house in their countries and provide it to their populations at scale.
And Dr. Syed, do you believe that with every new variant of this virus coming, because this virus has shown more mutations than any other virus that we have seen in the recent past, would we require a different vaccine every time? Because for Omicron, I don't know, and you may please enlighten us on that, if we require a new vaccine to treat this new variant, or the old vaccines will just work efficiently against this variant as well?
So right now, the vaccines that we have available here, for example, in the United States, and also, many of them around the world, they're based on the ancestral strain of the COVID-19 virus, so the one that first came out in Wuhan. But they still work well in terms of the ones we have in the U.S. for, with Omicron. Yes, they've taken a hit in terms of symptomatic disease, as I've mentioned, but they're still holding steady in terms of preventing the severe outcomes. Now, we do anticipate, obviously, Omicron variant-specific booster doses be available. Now, would there be a need for it? Given how fast Omicron is surging and kind of declining, that's yet to be seen. But I do think the way we need to move forward is we need to have a pan-coronavirus vaccine. What this means is that it doesn't matter what type of variant we're going to encounter, whether it's going to be another one that's worse than Omicron or less than Omicron. At least we have a pan-coronavirus that is going to work across all different variants, and that is being developed right now. It's unclear what the timeline is going to be, when it's going to be available to the world, but we need to look at better versions, better generations of these vaccines, and not just intramuscular, but intranasal, so we can look at reducing infection rates and transmission rates as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Syed Madad, for being a guest in my program. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Dr. Syed Madad from the United States. What she explained is a very important point, that despite the fact that research is still underway with regards to the new variant and how vaccines can help us against this variant, it is important to understand that vaccines stand to be the only line of defense for us in the fight against COVID pandemic. Let me remind you that Pakistan has done a tremendous job when it comes to vaccination. Despite the fact that Pakistan was facing paramount economic challenges, our rate of compliance on vaccines, or our vaccination rate, has been very fast. My second guest in the program is someone who has played a very important role in Pakistan's vaccination drive. His name is Dr. Syed Khan. He's professor and head of molecular pathology at Dow University of Health Sciences, Karachi. He has also appeared in my program before. Dr. Syed, I welcome you to my program again, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Dr. Syed, we are talking about this inequality of vaccine distribution in the world. And the recent list that I just shared in my package reminds us the fact that there are more than 50 countries that have not been able to get even 10% of their population vaccinated. Is that a real fear for the rest of us?
Yes, of course, the vaccination need to be reached to each and every single person in the world. Otherwise, we cannot control this pandemic. And this is one of the reasons that across the globe, we have still many countries and many people who has not received a single dose of the vaccine. And many of the countries, they don't have the capacity and capability to acquire the vaccine. And this is the responsibility of the world to distribute and the vaccine justifiably and to control the pandemic. Otherwise, a single person on the globe without vaccination, we are inviting this pandemic to continue with new variants and new uh, difficulties for the rest of the world, even those who are already vaccinated. So we need to support those people who don't have the financial capacity or uh, logistic capacity to acquire the vaccine.
Dr. Said, the statistics that we have gathered for this program tell us that the global vaccination production is 1.5 billion doses per month, which is enough to meet the global requirement. Now it is only a matter of distribution and the supply chain that has been a major problem. How do you think of that? How big of a problem do you believe is the supply chain in this very given situation?
Of course, this is the initiative of the WHO in the developed countries. We have a slogan called "No one is safe until everyone is safe." So, if we are unable to provide the vaccine to those underdeveloped countries and not meeting the criteria of the logistics and proper distribution of the vaccine, we are not in a right direction to deal with the pandemic. So this is a challenge worldwide, and still many of the people or countries, they think that they should provide the vaccine first to their population or their nations, but that is not the right way to deal with the pandemic. If we control the virus within few countries and other countries still at risk, that means everyone in the world is at risk. So we need to work on this issue to provide the vaccine to each and every person across the globe.
Dr. Said, you know that there are many people who are quite skeptical about these vaccines and their effectivity as well. And they have their own line of argument that criticizes the use of vaccine, particularly the vaccines that we are using to treat coronavirus. And one of the main arguments that they have is that not only this vaccine has been developed pretty sooner, I mean sooner than any other vaccine that we had ever developed in our history, but ever since the vaccines have been brought, the normal flu, which was a prevalent disease in winters, it was very common, has somehow eradicated. Is it true that normally the test kits would test flu also as positive, even if it's not a COVID flu?
This is the other side of the story. People who don't have vaccine, and the other side, people that do have the vaccine, but they are skeptical and they have concerns about the usage of the vaccine, and they have a few questions about the vaccine, that the vaccine is just develop in a short period of time, this vaccine may not be effective. And some of the question can be answered, and some of the question that will take a while to be answered. Because making the vaccine a short time is not a bad thing. Is because of the world is developed a lot, and we have a new technology, so we don't need that much longer period of time. And the other side, we have this pandemic, so we need to respond quickly. We cannot wait for a long time. If we keep on waiting for a long time for so-called better vaccine, so this virus will destroy majority of the population. So the vaccine has a good effect in terms of reducing the mortality and morbidity, though it is unable completely to stop the transmission of the virus. And that's why we have voices and complaints that this vaccine is not 100% effective to control the pandemic. But this is half truth, because if you see the current wave of the Omicron, though it is affecting millions of people, but if you see and compare the number of deaths and hospitalization, it is much lesser than the previous wave, and the only reason is the vaccination program. So yes, we need to move in a better direction to have much better vaccine, but still it is very effective. And the other side, the question that you have asked, that how we can differentiate between the normal flu and the COVID. Yes, of course we can differentiate, because these are two different viruses. Flu is influenza virus, and COVID, SARS-CoV-2 is a coronavirus. So genetically they are different. We have tests available which can detect through PCR, through genetic sequencing, and we can easily differentiate between the two viruses based on the laboratory tests.
Dr. Said, you have a very important role when it comes to Pakistan's vaccination plan. I understand that you have played an imperative role in this regard, and Pakistan has done, by the way, a tremendous job. Our rate of vaccination is much better than many other economies, as challenged as that of ours, because Pakistan's economic situation was not very good when COVID broke out. Still, they have done a tremendous job. How do you comment on a government's strategy and the creation of NCOC that actually provided a platform which could hold all these stakeholders together and vaccinate Pakistan at such a rapid pace?
Of course, is one of the best response that ever seen on the globe, though we have many limitations in terms of financial constraint and poor or weakened healthcare system. Besides that, with the support of the common people and healthcare workers, especially the NCOC, the response against the pandemic in Pakistan was remarkable. And it was appreciated by the international bodies, including the WHO. In terms of vaccination, the government of Pakistan been able to acquire quite good quantity of vaccine, and the government, the provincial government as well as the federal government provided the vaccination centers. They developed very good centers and nearby, and they provided the facilities free of cost for each and every citizen. Now it is the responsibility of the population and the citizen that they should capitalize these facilities and should come out of their houses and reach out to these vaccination centers and get themselves vaccinated. These vaccines is not 100% free for the government. They have to pay one way or the other, but for the population or for the citizen, it is completely free. So this is a good initiative by the government of Pakistan, both the provincial and the...
Thank you very much, Dr. Syed, for being my guest in today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Dr. Syed Khan, and an important point that he made was that as long as everyone is not safe, no one is safe. And Pakistan has done a tremendous job with regards to vaccination, but at a global canvas, this remains to be a major problem. We'll take a break and we'll join you back with the second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. The state of Kazakhstan is simmering with a revolt that has taken 160 lives. 12,000 people have been detained. Russia had sent forces for the rescue of the state of Kazakhstan, the forces that have been recently sent back. In this entire scenario, there is one important thing that has happened, and that is that the president, Kasim Jomarat, who is the president of Kazakhstan, who was not the president of Security Council, has taken position as the president of Security Council as well. He has dissolved the cabinet and appointed a new prime minister, rather handpicked a new prime minister for his country. His name is Ali Khan Samilov, who is 49 years old and has remained deputy prime minister in the recent cabinet that has been devolved. The two times remained prime minister Karim Masimov has been arrested and charged for treason. He's under trial these days. Now, this is a very important development because Kazakhstan is an important country of Central Asian Republic. The country is massive in size. Its geographical area is as much as that of entire Western Europe. It has a boundary with China. It sits next to the doors of Russia and is an important source of uranium and liquid petroleum gas. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my guests for this segment of the program.
Violent unrest broke out in the oil-rich Central Asian country Kazakhstan after protests over rising fuel prices spread across the country. The demonstrations morphed into wider discontent against President Tokayev's government such that public buildings across Kazakhstan were ransacked and torched in the worst violence experienced by the former Soviet Republic in 30 years of independence. Almaty, the financial hub of 1.8 million people, was devastated during clashes between security forces and government opponents that gave way to a spree of looting. The government's reversal on fuel price cap, as well as President's January 5 decision to sack the cabinet and remove former longtime President Nursultan Nazarbayev from the chairmanship of Kazakhstan's Security Council, did little to placate public anger. The human toll is reportedly up to 225 deaths, with thousands of arrests, according to the latest count by Kazakh authorities. On January 5, Kazakh President Tokayev invoked Article 4 of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is a Russian-led alliance of the former Soviet states, according to which if one member is subjected to aggression by an external force, it is considered an aggression against all member states. Russian President Vladimir Putin hinted that the violence was reminiscent of color revolutions instigated by foreign meddling. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki dismissed claims that the US was driving the protests in Kazakhstan, allegations she accused Moscow of spreading. Though the situation in Kazakhstan has stabilized, but there are speculations that this episode further inflamed great power tensions against the backdrop Ukraine crisis.
My guest in this segment of the program is Clint Roick from Moscow State Institute of International Relations. He has written for BBC, Washington Post and Foreign Policy Journal. I welcome you, Roick, to my program. And in Islamabad studio, I have with me Dr. Inayat Kaleem, who is a political analyst and an expert of Central Asian region. I welcome you, Dr. Inayat Kaleem, in my program as well. Dr. Inayat, first question is a statement that we have seen from the representative of Secretary General of United Nations. Listen to the statement and then I'll take your comments on that. Let's listen to the statement given by Stefan Dujarric, who is representative of Secretary General of United Nations.
Concern and are monitoring the situation in Kazakhstan. I think it's very important for all involved in these current events to exercise restraint, refrain from violence, and promote dialogue in addressing all of the pertinent issues.
Refrain from violence, look for dialogue. What are your comments, sir?
Well, I must say that it's not quite easy the way they are asking for the dialogue. I mean, there are so many factors involved. And we have to, if you really want to bring durable peace in Kazakhstan, you have to do a lot of things.
I'm coming to you, Clint Roik, and while we were discussing about this situation in Kazakhstan, it was one important factor, and that is that there are allegations being leveled from Moscow for the external influence on the situation. White House press secretary has given a statement about it. Listen to the statement before I take your comment on that.
We're monitoring reports of protests in Kazakhstan. We support calls for calm, for protesters to express themselves peacefully, and for authorities to exercise restraint. There are some crazy Russian claims about the U.S. being behind this, so let me just use this opportunity to convey that as absolutely false and clearly a part of the standard Russian disinformation playbook we've seen a lot of in past years.
Do you agree with Jen Psaki? As she said, the United States has no role to play in that.
I think that Russia actually exercised restraint in not directly accusing the United States of fomenting the protests. Instead, Russia made allegations that the situation represented a color revolution from unspecified actors. And it's clear that the United States had been providing funding inside Kazakhstan. The National Endowment for Democracy had spent more than $1 million there in the preceding year. And Russia did not directly highlight that and simply alluded to the fact that there were external actors involved.
But Roik, how happy would be Russia with the development happening in Kazakhstan? Because the former president Nursultan Nazarbayev, whose influence is now apparently on the decline, was a hand-picked man of the Russian administration.
I think that Russia was very pleased by the success of the CSTO operation in the country. The CSTO now has its first successful mission. Unlike NATO, it had not previously deployed as a peacekeeping force before, and so the rapidity of Russia's success in leading that effort now establishes the CSTO not as a paper tiger, but as a really effective force in Central Asia.
But that doesn't answer my question, is how happy would be Russia with these developments, because Nursultan Nazarbayev has remained in power, certainly with the blessings of Russia, and now his overall influence is on the decline. How would Russia take this development?
Well, I think that it's very positive for Russia, because now the leader of the country is someone who called for CSTO intervention, and so Kazakhstan is now positioned closer to Russia, and it provides a template for states in Central Asia that want to maintain stability to align themselves with the CSTO. And so that puts pressure on states like Uzbekistan to consider whether it's willing to rejoin the CSTO in order to have those kinds of security guarantees.
Dr. Nayat Kaleem, how happy are you with this recent intervention made by the neighboring states, and it all ending so soon, because Russian peacekeeping troops have already gone?
Yes. Actually, we need to understand and we need to read between the lines. That is, that uprising occurred on 2nd Jan and ended in the by force on 15th Jan. I mean, actually, we need to understand that why that happened. Actually, there was only a small protest occurred in the oil-rich city of Kazakhstan, that is Zanozem, and where government decided to increase a rise in the fuel prices, and that was actually the protesters contended that this will actually lead to a steep increase in food prices, and eventually that would further actually deepen income inequality in the country that has plagued the nation over the decades. To understand this, I think the government, at the same time, we need to understand that globally every country, developed, underdeveloped, is going through economic crunch. Countries are facing economic recessions, along with we have a period of pandemic, and of course we are also facing the brunt of COVID-19. Apart from this, we also add on in Kazakhstan one more thing, that is poor governance. I mean, that was the only reason I must say, otherwise there would have been uprising across the world, but now countries are managing with their resources. In Kazakhstan, we have seen a different situation. Nur Sultan Nazarbayev also was one of the hand-picked guy of Russia, and then he ruled there for 3 decades, and he then resigned, and his handmade person was actually the president Qasim Jobard. So actually if you see in the larger picture, nothing is going on to appease people in the drastic level. I mean, the ground level, if you see, nothing is being done by the government of Kazakhstan.
Let me take Clint Roy in this conversation. Clint, do you believe that the absence of democracy is the major problem, and that is what is taking people out in the streets in the state of Kyrgyzstan?
I think that was a significant factor, but that the more direct factor was the inequality and the poverty that was a result of the pandemic. Kazakhstan's standard of living was already lagging behind Belarus and Russia, but during the pandemic, unemployment increased significantly, inequality increased significantly. And so really this represents a systemic problem around the globe, but one that Kazakhstan was already vulnerable to because of the economic problems that it was facing. And so I think that the elimination of the fuel subsidy that then caused fuel prices to rise was sort of like lighting a match in an area that already had volatile tinder. It was dry, the fire started, and once it started burning, it was out of control and it caused rapid escalation. But I would say that the poverty exacerbated by the pandemic was the immediate proximate cause of the crisis.
And do you believe that Qasim Jamaat, he's taken so many steps to overcome this problem? He feels confident, and that is why he has sent the Russian forces back. But do you believe that Qasim would be able to overcome these problems, because these are embedded deep into the system of this country? It cannot be just undone overnight. We understand that he has dismissed several cabinet members, dissolved the previous cabinet, but is that enough?
I think that what we're going to see is really the consolidation of a power vertical inside Kazakhstan at this point. That previously the power sharing agreement, where Tokayev was not the head of the Security Council and therefore didn't directly control the military, really fractured power in the country and left it inherently vulnerable. And that now, especially with Russian backing, he's going to consolidate his power. And so I expect there to be greater political stability, and that political stability and the strength of the president as an executive could be used to coerce concessions from oligarchs, similar to what we saw in Saudi Arabia when the Crown Prince MBS came to power. He was able to get significant financial contributions from the wealthy oligarchs inside his state, and I believe that the same process is going to unfold in Kazakhstan with a social safety net that's going to increase as government coffers increase based on those concessions financially from oligarchs.
Coming back to you, Dr. Inayat Kaleem, how do you think China would be seeing to this development? Because again, another neighborhood of China has started showing signs of discomfort, uneasiness, things that might turn into any direction. Yes. How would China be looking toward the situation, sir?
Obviously, China will be affected in this crisis. As you know that Kazakhstan shares 1780 kilometer long border on its southeastern side, and China shares its Xinjiang province with Kazakhstan. There is also intimacy, ethnic intimacy between these two countries, so far as Uyghurs and the Turks are concerned. Apart from this, China has invested tens of billions of dollars in Kazakhstan, mostly in the energy sector. And apart from this, the Chinese President Xi signature project, Belt and Road Initiative, has also been extended to Kazakhstan with a vision to seek access to the European countries. And as far as the Kazakhstan's historic legacy is concerned, historically Kazakhstan served as a bridge, cultural, economic and trade bridge between Asia and Europe, and the old routes, Silk Route, Sable Route, as well as fur, passed through this region. So historically it is pivotal, and I must say that the Chinese are looking and have a very close eye on it, on the development. And apart from this, I've also read in so many other Western as well as Asian journals that China's investment to some quarters from Afghanistan within Kazakhstan is considering as negative, and some part it is considering as positive. Some believe that the Chinese continuous extensive huge investment in Kazakhstan would bring country debt trap, to the debt trap level, and that is the reason that reservations are there. But China has invested so much in Kazakhstan, and I must say that it would have a close eye on the development.
Clint, how do you think of what Dr. Inayat Kaleem just said? He believes that there are some factions within Kazakhstan that might believe that China is extending a debt trap toward the country and might just not welcome the extension of its projects.
I agree with what he said. I would also note that there's an interesting dynamic where China may be interested in having security in Central Asia guaranteed more directly through its Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and that the intervention in Kazakhstan was done through the CSTO, of which China is not a member. And so initially we saw China indirectly condemn the operation and then quickly pivot and provide its support once the operation was successful. But there's still definitely a simmering tension where China would prefer the use of more multilateral forms that include China in order to guarantee security in Central Asia, whereas Russia would prefer to provide that stability through the CSTO directly.
Clint, just a few months ago, we were discussing in the same program, I had a heavy guest lineup from Russia and the United States, and we were discussing the crisis in Belarus. Again, everyone was pointing out towards Russia. Just a few weeks ago, we were discussing Ukraine to be another flashpoint, which just might become, God forbid, another war zone for planet Earth. And now we are discussing Kazakhstan. Do you believe that there is a continuous unrest around Russia and maybe something is boiling that... do you see a correlation between all these three events, or do you believe it's just mere luck that all of these things are happening pretty much on the same timelines?
I don't think that it's bad luck. I think that it represents a structural factor, which is the beginning of a new Cold War between Russia and the West, and that we see these flashpoints because they're simply proxies for that greater conflict. And so whether the West is involved indirectly by providing support for NGOs within those countries, or more directly by providing arms in Ukraine, that's really the structural factor that is propelling those conflicts forward. And if it's not reined in, I'm very pessimistic about the future in those regions, unfortunately.
He has handpicked, Qasim Jumarat has handpicked Ali Khan Semilov, who's 49 years old. He remained Deputy Prime Minister in the cabinet that was dissolved. Who is this gentleman and what is his background and how much can we expect from him when it comes to the political stability of the country?
I think that it's a big question mark because the factions inside the country have not really stabilized, and so there's open question marks about the loyalty of everyone within the regime, and whether there's even been a split completely between Nazarbayev and the Tokayev faction. So until we have greater political stability within the country, I think that it would be premature for me to speculate what we can see. I think that the only thing that can be certain is that Tokayev himself has consolidated power, and that his program of extracting concessions from oligarchs will continue unabated, hopefully with the assistance of his cabinet.
Dr. Inayat Kaleem, do you actually agree with that, what he just said, which seems to be a transition of power from the old regime into a new regime taking on firm grounds and trying to renegotiate the relationship that this wonderful, massive country has with Russia?
Russia, Kremlin well aware of the fact that volatility in Central Asia can easily catch fire on its Russian borders. That is for sure, and that is why, and they fear such uprisings. They have named it colors revolutions. I mean, in 2003 we have witnessed, a revolution, Rose Revolution in Georgia. Then we also experienced another revolutions in Ukraine, which was named as Orange Revolution, then we also experience Armenian revolutions, and now this one. So these are not, I mean, merely the coincidence happening around Russia. Of course, there, as I agree with the researchers, that there is structural problems, governance issues. Along with this, I would like to add on that you might have noticed, whenever you try to impose your own person's choice, handpicked, that that proved to be debacle for so far as the governance of the countries are concerned. That is what happening around Russia, and Russia has a lot of interest in Central Asia so far as Kazakhstan is concerned. It cannot leave it alone, because Kazakhstan militarily, I would like to add, militarily it is very much significant for Russians. Why? Because the Kopistan range area where Russia used to test its continental missile test there, and there is intercontinental ballistic missiles are located in Ural mountain range, in and around Ural mountain range. Apart from this, Russia is also working on a first nuclear plant to mitigate the energy demands of Central Asian states, including Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan's energy demands is skyrocketed. So I think Russia does have certain interest in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anayat Kaleem, for being my guest today. Thank you very much, Clint Roy, for being a guest in my program today. Ladies and gentlemen, as both of my guests highlighted, the country, the state of Kazakhstan, has a great significance for Russia. It is an important state where the military muscle of Russia has remained quite visible to the rest of the world. The nuclear asset, the uranium sources, and the LPG sources available in this country are reminding us of the significance that this country has for Russia and as well as for China. It will be important to see how Russia responds to the challenges in this region. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.